I understand every word you said, Single Dad replied in German. The young German heiress froze. The cafe on the corner was nearly empty that late afternoon. James, a single dad in his 30s, sat by the window with his daughter, Emma, sharing a slice of cheesecake. Money was tight, but he wanted her to have a small treat after her tough week at school. At the far end of the cafe, two young women entered, dressed elegantly, their voices carrying that unmistakable sharpness of privilege. They were speaking in German, laughing lightly as they glanced over at James and Emma. One of them, blonde and striking, seemed to be the leader, Clara von Reinhardt, daughter of one of Germany's wealthiest industrial families. Thinking no one around understood, she made a dismissive remark about James's worn-out jacket, about Emma's shoes that were patched more than once. Schau in, dear Anne. I'm Vader, der Sichkom, Sane, Tochter, Komorn kann, traurig, aber, irgendwie, amusant. Look at him. A father who can barely take care of his daughter. Sad, but somehow amusing. Her friend giggled. They thought it was harmless chatter. James set down his fork, his jaw tightening. Emma hadn't caught the words, but she noticed the change in her father's expression. Slowly, James looked over at them. And then, in flawless German, his voice steady and calm, he said, Ich habe jedes Wort verstanden, das Sie gesagt haben. I understood every word you said. The heiress froze. Her face drained of color as the weight of her words came back to her like a slap. The entire cafe went silent for a moment. Her friend stared, shocked. James leaned forward, his gaze piercing but not cruel. You see a jacket, shoes, the surface. What you don't see, he continued, in German still, is the strength it takes to raise a child alone. The sacrifices made, the nights spent working 2 jobs, so she can smile over cheesecake on a Friday. Respect isn't about money. It's about humanity. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. For perhaps the first time in her life, someone had spoken to her without fear, without trying to flatter her wealth. The people in the cafe began to whisper, some shaking their heads at her. Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, what did you say? James softened instantly, patting her hand, just reminding someone that kindness matters. The heiress looked down, ashamed. Then, as if compelled, she walked to James's table. Switching to English this time, her voice was quieter, humbled. You're right. I was cruel. I'm sorry, truly. James gave her a long look, then nodded once. An apology means little unless you learn from it. Clara nodded, tears threatening at the corner of her eyes. For the first time, the billionaire heiress understood that some battles aren't fought with money, but with dignity. As James and Emma left the cafe, she watched them go, haunted by a single thought. For all her wealth, she had never felt as rich as that little girl, holding her father's hand with pride. James Walker wasn't the kind of man people noticed in a cafe. He blended into the background, broad-shouldered, but dressed plainly. His jacket worn at the elbows, his hands rough from years of manual work. What most didn't see were the quiet sacrifices etched into those hands. Across from him sat Emma, his 9-year-old daughter. She had his smile, the kind that lit up even the dimmest corners of life. Today, he had splurged on a slice of cheesecake for her, something he almost never did. Money was a constant worry, but Emma's laughter was worth every penny. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and 2 young women swept inside like they owned the air itself. Their coats were tailored, their jewelry subtle, but impossibly expensive. They ordered in crisp German and chose a table near the window, not far from James and Emma. One of them, tall and commanding, was Clara von Reinhardt, heiress to the Reinhardt industrial empire. The other, Elise, was her childhood friend and shadow. Both women were used to being admired, never questioned. At first, James ignored them, but then Clara's gaze drifted toward his table. Her lips curved in a faint smirk, and she leaned toward Elise. Her voice low but clear enough for anyone fluent in German. Schau dir dies beiden an. Village kleiding Altaschuh, sieht aus, als obia, kaum in der Lage ist, sein eigenes, kein zu Ernharn. Look at those two. Cheap clothes, old shoes. He looks like he can barely feed his own child. Elise laughed, though a little nervously. Clara went on, sharper this time, traurig, aber fast unter wie ein Schauspiel, das man auf der Stage sieht. Sad, but almost entertaining. Like a play you watch on the street. James froze mid-bite. He set the fork down with deliberate calm. He hadn't spoken German in years, not since leaving Berlin after a contract job with an engineering firm went south. But he hadn't forgotten a single word. Emma noticed. "Daddy, you okay?" He gave her a reassuring nod. Then, with a controlled breath, he turned toward Clara. His voice carried just enough weight to silence the room. "Ich habe Jeeds Wort, verstand? Das Sie gesagt haben." I understood every word you said. The heiress went rigid. For the first time in her gilded life, she had miscalculated. Her smirk vanished, replaced by a flush of embarrassment. Elise's fork clattered against her plate, eyes darting between James and her friend. James didn't stop there. Switching seamlessly between English and German, his tone sharpened but never rose above calm. "You see only what your money allows you to see. A jacket that's old, shoes that are patched. But what you don't see," he leaned forward, his eyes locked on Clara's, "is the kind of strength it takes to raise a child alone, to give up sleep, comfort, and everything you once dreamed, just so she can smile over a piece of cake." The calf was silent now. Even the barista had stopped mid-pour. Clara tried to speak, but nothing came out. The arrogance had drained from her face. People were watching her not with admiration, but disappointment. Emma tugged gently at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, what's happening?" James softened instantly, brushing her hair back. "Just reminding someone that kindness is free." That line, simple, powerful, landed harder than anything else. Clara stood slowly. For once, her poise abandoned her. She approached James's table, her voice low and trembling. "You're right. I was cruel. And you have every reason to despise me. I'm sorry." James studied her, his eyes unreadable. Then he said softly, "An apology is a start, but real change comes when you stop seeing people as less than you." Emma beamed up at her father, proud, without fully understanding why. As James gathered their things to leave, Clara watched them go, father and daughter, hand in hand, radiating a richness she had never felt, despite her billions. For the first time in her life, Clara von Reinhardt realized that money could buy silence, power, and respect, but it could never buy dignity.